Okay, a very good evening to Professor Mehrotra and all of you for joining us this evening. Professor Mehrotra is a professor at the Center for the Study of Social Systems at Jawaharlal Nehru University. And today she will speak on the broad theme of student diversity and inclusive education. As you can see from the title in her slide, her talk is titled Social Context of Disability and Higher Education in India. Just a few words of introduction. She has been a professor at CSSS in JNU for many years. Her research interests span a very wide range from tribal studies and disability studies to ethnographic methods and food and rituals. She has been a visiting faculty at many prestigious universities, especially in the US. She has published extensively, including two books, one titled Disability, Gender, and State Policy, Exploring Margins in 2013 by Robert Publications, and the other is Disability Studies in India, Interdisciplinary Perspective, published by Springer in 2020. Given her wide experience and research on disability studies in the country and elsewhere, it's a real pleasure to have you with us today, and it's actually central to the whole theme of uh, of student diversity and inclusive education, because no section of society really should be left out of the opportunities of education and moving forward. So, with these introductory remarks, may I welcome you to deliver your address. And I think, Nilika, it's okay if students or participants ask questions in between or raise their hands or put questions in the chat.
Yeah. If it is not too distracting,
Okay.
yeah, because I would definitely like to show some of these slides so that they can capture what I'm trying to say here,
Sure.
and I can keep around half an hour for discussion in the end, if
Sure.
possible.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So thank you very much, Professor Saikia, for this opportunity to speak to colleagues from different parts of the country. And this student diversity and inclusive practices is something that um, is being talked about in recent years a lot. So, what I was saying was that in the recent years, as part of the policy, the question of inclusion and inclusive education is being emphasized a great deal, and disability appears as one of the very important questions, along with a focus on SCs, STs, and minorities. And this is one of the more recent issues that is being discussed at the level of higher education. Earlier, there was more focus on children with disabilities, especially in schools. So I'm going to actually talk about some of the issues that are inherent in the way we look at the disability question with regard to higher education institutions. My recent work also revolves around that how um, disability question remains invisible, and it is not really talked about, though it has interdisciplinary focus. So I'll just run you uh, through some slides. I'm not going to discuss the statistics because a lot of the statistics is also dated, but this is just to give you a faint idea about how we are doing as far as higher education institutions are concerned with regard to disability. So just mm. so what I'm trying to argue here is that uh, persons with disabilities are still marginal to marginal to higher education institutions, and I think that we need a lot of uh, effort in trying to create inclusive environment and inclusive practices, right from the spaces within which persons with disabilities, I'll talk of it as PWDs, and they are whether they are being welcomed at all in higher education institutions, though we see them all around as part of student population, as well as faculty and non-teaching population. So, what I'm going to do through this presentation is to actually problematize first the concept of disability, its complexity, and the terms of discourses with which they are employed in India, especially in relation to higher education. Question which is often asked to me is about the nomenclature, that why I use the term disabled or persons with disability. So there are two reasons. One is that persons with disability is also appears in the policy framework, especially the disability policy of the state. So it is an administrative accepted category, and its translation, Divyang, I have reservations about it, and the disability community, especially the activists, have taken a very strong, view of the term Divyang. So I will not be using the term. And then there are terms like differently abled and challenged and so on. Differently abled is also used in a very pejorative fashion, we where we assume that persons with disabilities have some special abilities which they are trying to resist and protest against. So that is another thing, and the term disabled, which I'll be using interchangeably with the persons with disability. Disabled, like Dalits, is a political categorization, and which is more acceptable within the disability community rather than other terms. But as we know that the term disability is an evolving one, and so at the moment, you know. Within academia and in political context, these two terms are being used more often. Uh, so, when we are looking at higher education institutions, there are questions about policy that we need to be concerned about. Then, what is there, since we have a law now, RPD Act, Rights of Persons with Disability 2016, which is based on UNCRPD, United Nations Convention on Rights of Persons with Disability. So it is an obligation of the state towards the international norms as well, which requires the state to take good deal of efforts to include persons with disability in higher education settings. Then there is a question of representation. Who is representing whom? Do they have a voice? Are they part of the policy issues? Are they part of the implementation? Um, eh, uh, is the user perspective taken in making, say, buildings more accessible? which is the third, point that I'm going to dwell on. So accessibility is a very important issue, and it is both in terms of physical accessibility, that is the buildings, the roads, the habitation in the university and the higher education settings uh, has norms that are based on universal design, that practices are put in place, and the services like uh, uh, the assistive devices, whether the assistive devices are being given to people or not, then and that is about all the the different population within the category of disability, and also about the social aspect of accessibility, that are there attitudinal barriers, are there uh, is there a discrimination in the structures and practices of HEIs, where persons with disabilities do not feel included, or they are included. So these are some of the questions. The other question is about faculty training, which is, I think, extremely important, because I'm talking to a group of professionals here, academic professionals. What we have also seen that we haven't had uh, uh, our disciplines laced with the question of disability. And this, I'm largely also talking about the social science disciplines, um, because I have had more experience with that. Disability, of course, is taught as part of medical sciences and rehabilitation sciences, psychology, social work, etc. But in social science disciplines, humanities, disability perspective has just entered in last one decade or so, and so you find some research coming in with the persons with disabilities. So research is one major area where we require total overhaul. Um, and we one of the major problems with that is that we don't have much numbers available to us, and we don't even have ethnographic studies, that is the detailed studies of how persons with disability live as part of different societies. Uh, so I'll just show you some very basic, information which is drawn from different sources, and which just indicate why, there are so few people with disabilities in the higher education settings. Yeah, so this is a slide which is based from the government sources, and which shows prevalence of disability. There are other indicators also which show that around 10% of the population has some disability or the other in the world. And the same is almost true of our context also. Around 9% persons with disability live in India, and that's a huge number. And this is a slide. It is so interesting that we had the last census in 2011, and after that, disabled persons have not been counted. Even before this 2011 census, there was no separate category for persons with disability. So we have, data is a huge, huge issue. And this is again disabled population by sex and residence. I can send in this PowerPoint and it can be shared, but it's all there in the in the government sources. Um, this is again this shows that between 2001 and 2011, there was an increase both in rural and urban areas, and larger number of disabled people live in rural areas. And we also find that the numbers are increasing in urban areas. Mm, So this is by social groups, and you can see that large number of actually persons with disabilities also belong to already marginalized groups, that is scheduled caste and scheduled tribes, which makes their position even more vulnerable. So this is a slide which is based largely on the PWD Act, that is Persons with Disability Act 1995, where 7 types of disabilities were identified by the state. So you can see that only these categories are there, and by 2016 we have identified 21 types of disabilities for the purpose of policy and practice. This is about general education among disabled. So you can see uh, that there is a gender gap, there is a rural and urban gap, and very few are actually, they reach the secondary and above level. So large number of the studies also show that large number of children with disabilities actually drop out, especially from the poorer backgrounds, and because of lack of transportation, inaccessible schools or special schools, and many other factors, especially in the rural areas. So this is about the literacy. This is called, this is written literally, but this is literacy status of disabled people, and you can see that the very large population of disabled persons are illiterate in the Indian context. There are also then enrollment gaps, which I do not need to actually go into. Uh, a number of special schools. Special schools are those that are actually they devoted to certain kinds of disabilities. So you have largely schools for the blind students, then hearing and speech impaired, intellectually disabled, and so on. So in 1947, when the India gained um, independence, there were only 20 schools. And by 2003, we have around 3,000 schools, which is still a very, very low, percentage, given the fact that you have a very large population which requires, you know, uh, training and education in with regard to the nature of impairments that they have. Um, this is a slide about again the different kinds of disabilities. So there are severely disabled people, and you can see in the severely disabled category, um, there is no education, virtually no education uh, given to, or they are able to access higher education, um, and only and but this is also true of moderate and mild PWDs. So a very and but this is a very old data, but this came in the World Bank report of 2007. So you can see that so few are able to reach um, the higher education settings. Again, there is this slide on total number of disabled and non-disabled students in the 52 universities of India. This is a report, and after this, we have not had many reports. And you can see the gender gap here, and also the fact that very few women with disabilities are able to actually enroll in universities. Uh, then you can see male population and the female population, and this is a very glaring gap that you see, um, and this is really a cause of worry. Mm, this I may not. Employment is another area, but I'm not going to cover that. Um, so there is also an assumption that the persons with disability should only do vocational courses, and employment is seen as some kind of a rehabilitation for persons with disability. So you find that there are so few rehabilitation centers as well. The numbers have increased in last 10 years or so, but still they remain dismally low. So, here you can see from the slides that the situation is really grim as far as access to education, higher education is concerned for persons with disabilities. And I think as educationists, I think we should all worry about the gaps that you find here. Some studies also suggest that these gaps are because you have a very large dropout rate, and despite the fact that you have a reservation for them, the number of seats are not being filled. So I'll come to this issue a little later. So now I actually try to explain how, as social scientists, we look at the question of disability. And this also explains why there is a kind of apathy to the question of disability. So, in sociology and anthropology, there are number of concepts that are used to understand the situation of PWDs. So there is a very interesting dichotomy which is used to understand what is normal, what is able. Through the works of classical thinkers like Durkheim to Murphy, this is for those who uh, do not have background in sociology. So you have notions like normal versus pathological. So normality is something that the society considered to be normal, and this definition of normal or ability varies from one society to another. So there are different kinds of definitions around the question of disability. But in a large context, disability may fall in the category of pathological. That is why I say that, a medical kind of model is used because disabled people are, first of all, seen as people who require medical intervention. So it is true that many disabilities or impairments are because of diseases and accidents, or they could be congenital or acquired. So medical intervention may be required there, but largely using a medical lens to understand disability actually tries to find the problem within the individual, and that has been a problem because the assumption is that the individual needs to return to the normal everyday life functioning of society through uh, you know uh, 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 leaving the sick role, as it were. So disabled people could be seen as sick, or the concept of stigma is very important here. uh, a large number of disabilities are stigmatized in our context, and they are discriminated against because we have strange notions about, and assumptions about their capabilities and the functionalities. Um, there is also a concept of liminality which is used here. Um, uh, the Murphy, a very famous anthropologist who spoke about his self as a disabled self when he acquired this impairment at the age of 40, and he speaks about how he was neither normal nor sick, and he was somewhere in between. So, this medical model has been extremely influential not only in academic discourses but also in the policy and practice. And in a country like ours, medical model continues to inform our understanding of disability. Um, this was, in around late 1980s, a social model again from sociology emerged, which spoke about the difference between impairment and disability. And impairment was thought to be in terms of the body or the mind, whereas disability was associated with the oppressive structures society as disabling, which means that if you don't have a ramp, wheelchair user cannot use the building, or if you don't have tactile paths, the blind people cannot actually walk comfortably. So the idea was that the disability is not because of impairments, but disability is because of the structures constructed by society in a way that persons with disabilities are not able to have a regular life. So social model has been extremely important, and social model actually focuses a lot on removing those barriers and attitudinal as well as physical barriers which construe persons with disability as vulnerable or as marginalized or discriminated against, etc. In the Indian context, we then there are post-structuralist and postmodernist approaches as well, which speak about the body and culture interface. So, if I am in chronic pain because of some disease or illness, my body also disables me. It is not only the culture which disables me. So, this kind of a interface is also very important. Where So those approaches have been influential in the recent times, and in the Indian context, post-colonial theory has been very, very important, looking at how colonization has left indelible impact on the psyche of people or the bodies of people, and how it continues to the colonial shadows continue to disable large number of populations, and in the new liberal era, it is whether it is disasters or whether it is displacements and so on, they continue to disable people. So it is not the person with disability who's at fault, but it is the larger structures which are seen to be responsible for disablement. Um, Besides this, I would also like to talk about ableism, theory of ableism, and which speaks about uh, the structures being ableist, which means that the structures, emphasize on abilities, functionalities to such an extent that anybody who can't fit in, it could be a child, it could be a elderly, it could be a person with disability who can't fit in, is seen as disabled. So disability, at some level is a kind of social and cultural construction, and the idea is that instead of just studying disability, we need to also study ability. What is ableism? And ableism is essentially seen to be discriminatory and oppressive in its approach. So, when we look at India in terms of policies, as I spoke about, that we did not have much of the policy framework till 1995. PWD Act gave a disability identity. The state policy was largely focused on persons with disability as welfare recipient, and gradually it kind of moved on paper to the idea of development. And now 2016 RPWD Act actually talks about the right-based model. So persons with disabilities are seen as citizens with their full rights, and uh, any kind of discrimination could be legally, challenged. But in India, disability is also a very important development issue, because I spoke about how larger number of people live in rural areas with extreme poverty. They have very little access to healthcare. It is not only persons with disability, but poor population has inaccessibility to healthcare, education, work, and employment. So it is a development issue, that how poverty often give rise to disability, and treating or addressing the question of disability as a development issue is one of the priorities of the state. But state action, as we have seen, especially from 1995 PWD Act, which provided uh, persons with different disabilities a kind of identity. Besides that, it sought to have numbers, because numbers are important for policy framework. Provision of accessible services, for instance, a person in a rural area, might just need spectacles in order to be, more functional. So all kinds of accessible services, assistive devices are important, and state actually looks into these some of these issues. Then reservation, which is largely, I think, more applicable to the population which has had education and are trying to find public employment. Then disability pension, rehabilitation remains a very, very important area. That is, we have Rehabilitation Council of India, which established many institutions for providing special education to people, and then community-based rehabilitation as well. That especially in the rural areas, these programs are being run. Um, and in 2006, there was a national policy on disability, which for the first time included women and girl children as a focus area in the policy, because PWDA Act eh, is gender neutral, and women and girl children actually suffer more on account of their gender as well as disability. In 2007, India signed UNCRPD, and in 2016, we had the law passed by Parliament. So there are problems of definition when we start looking at the question of disability. So you have every society has very different kinds of models, cultural models are there. Then there are official and state definitions, um, UN, World Bank, and WHO definitions, uh, like American Act. In US actually does not identify any disability, but in India you have 21 types of disabilities being identified by the state. Then WHO also looks at the question of disability in terms of an evolving definition, which takes into account psychological, social, environmental factors. We, as a researcher in disability studies, you find that you are constantly grappling for a proper operative definition of disability. Um, when we look at RPD Act, Rights of Persons with Disability Act 2016, we find disability being mentioned as a right issues, where mm, uh, the state identifies that persons with disability are subjected to discrimination and exclusion, and there is a need to restore respect and dignity for them. And these are through the, different, like for instance, I've kind of mentioned some of these things which are more um, important from the point of view of employment and skill development. Equal opportunity policies is something that we are very, very concerned with, because UGC also in its notification in, I think, 2005 or 6, I'm forgetting the year, um, came out with notification that all institutions should have enabling units or equal opportunity offices, which which could hear the grievances of students with disability and all other persons with disabilities if they have issues. Um, it also kind of spoke about reservation of posts for persons with benchmark disabilities. So you must have seen now the recruitment processes going on in different institutions where certain posts, 4% reservation is allowed for persons with disability. So then incentive and disincentive to employers in the private sector is another very important issue. So as far as the education is concerned, it was deemed to be the duty of the educational institution to provide inclusive education to students with disability. The question of curriculum, faculty training, they are all part of that. So creating a enabling environment for persons with disability is something which is the responsibility of the educational institutions. And every university or HAI should have a disability policy. But this is, you hardly see these things happening on the ground. So inclusive education is often seen to be a matter of schools, but inclusive education is a very, very important part of the policy at the higher education level as well. Um, and I have this adult education is another important, aspect which is highlighted in the RPD Act. When we actually look at disability and higher education in scenario in India, so we find that from 3% in 1995, it has been increased to 5%, but more generally, now the acceptable number is 4%. So reservation has been extended to persons with disability, but the question is that how many how many students with disabilities are able to access higher education. So I showed you some data which talks about how it is so difficult for children with disabilities to reach the level of higher education. One of my students who did her PhD on deaf people found that almost 80% um, children in Delhi NCR. She did her fieldwork here, and they do not reach the higher education settings. It varies from the nature of disability to other. So you find that blind people and persons with orthopedic disabilities are more visible. In JNU itself, I now see more blind people and wheelchair users, coming to the settings. But there is hardly any space for deaf or persons with the, intellectual disability. Uh, we have students with learning disabilities coming in, and now they are, they speak out, they voice out concerns about how they require more time in reading and writing. Persons with dyslexia, especially, almost every year in my own university, I find one or two students talking about dyslexia. Then there are also students with long-standing mental disabilities, psychosocial disabilities, who are also, making themselves more visible through asking for regional accommodation in the setting. Then so a large number of them actually they face stigma. When you talk to them, they have had very tough a journey to higher education settings. One of our student made a documentary a few years back, just before COVID, and where he took the narratives of persons with different kinds of disabilities in the JNU campus, and they spoke about the difficulties in following following the curriculum, which where uh, they are completely absent, they are invisible. Uh, they also spoke about the fact that teachers are not at all oriented into taking up their issues, as well as curriculum, fails to center the concerns of persons with disability. So it is not that they are they are all around us, but they are invisible. What I was you know trying to point out is that there is very the structures in both physical and social terms um, are often ableist in their orientation, and within which even students who are able to reach this level, they find it difficult to cope with some of their issues. I'm not saying all of them are like that. There are like in a place like JNU, there are organizations of blind students. There has been a disability rights movements across the universities in the context of Delhi. But we are not only talking about Delhi, we are talking about different settings. They include colleges, they include um, they include universities in smaller provincial towns, and so metros may have some kind of, probably sensitivity, and also provisions like assistive devices. So we have a Helen Keller unit in our library, and blind students are given laptops with JAW program, which has really, made their lives very simpler. You have options on the technology has been a little of leveler, which is, there is a huge digital divide, and especially during the COVID, this divide was also very clear. Uh, but the students with the disability were trying to actually frame their own cultures as virtual communities on the social media, and they were voicing their concerns. The other very important thing is that still there is very little research happening, and unless there is research, unless we have numbers, we have qualitative accounts of persons with disabilities, and we understand, we learn about their marginalities through intersectional perspectives. That is, looking at um, not only disability as a singular marker, but also where they belong to, their social backgrounds, caste, class, and religion as well, um, and whether they belong to urban, rural, and other kind of context. So we need studies, we need more research, we need um, the percolation of disability perspectives in all the disciplines. So in the recent volume that I edited, um, they were scholars coming from different disciplines, from political science to law, to social work, sociology, anthropology, development sector, architecture, who spoke about, the challenges they are facing in introducing disability in the theory, method, and the practice of their disciplines. So disability is a of a paramount importance. It is, since it kind of, um, uh, organizes social life in certain way. Um, And with climate change and new kind of developments in the world, we are seeing disabilities on the rise. So we require, a perspective which looks at disability not only as problem of certain people, but as a part of the human condition. And thus it should be made, an essential part of the way we practice in higher education settings. So with this, I thank you for a very patient listening, and I'll be very happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Mehrotra. Now, you can either put your questions in the chat or you can unmute yourself and ask. You can ask a question, you can make a comment, you can share an experience, whatever you like.
Good evening, ma'am. This is
Yes.
Mainpal from Delhi University. Hello.
Hi,
Yes.
Maple, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Ma'am, as you told, there are around 21 disabilities across the category. So, how the percentage is calculated for a particular disability?
That is again, the 40% is the minimum. So
Yes.
you have to have a disability more than 40%. So there the medical model is at work. Yeah, that is it. So you need to have a disability certificate in order to be identified as a person with disability.
For example, one of my friend is like his one eye is not working at all. So I contacted to doctors and they told that that is even not 40%, even
Yes.
50% of
Yes.
visibility
Yeah.
is gone.
Yeah. Yeah. So, again, I will not be able to answer these questions about, how the medical model really uh, works along with the policy framers. But it is interesting that, this percentage also works, uh, uh, which is very differently in different states. Um, in some states, it is 60%. In other states, it is 70%. In Haryana, where I was studying, it was 60%. So, depending on how, what is the nature of job, and for that, what is the minimum requirement in terms of the capacity. Again, the notion of capacity is pretty state centric, and there is a Dr. Satyendra Singh, who is an activist. He has been actually fighting for this, you know, uh, for inclusion of persons with, especially doctors with disabilities. And he talks about how it is, certain kind of specializations are closed to doctors with disability. So within every discipline, some kind of struggle is going on for mm, for including people, but it takes a long time. There are deep-seated prejudices and biases, and often persons with disabilities are not seen as capable of work. So that is another problem.
Look, in one of your early slides, if I remember correctly, the disability was higher for men than for women. Is that correct?
Yeah, actually, in some of the studies, it was also shown that the men often encounter disability, which is acquire disability because of accidents. Like in
Hmm.
Haryana, although I've never analyzed this aspect, but in Haryana, I was told that because of rash driving. Rash driving, a large number of accidents actually happen, and they include men with disability, men. And substance abuse is another thing which actually leads to psychosocial disability, especially in northern India. We know the case of drug abuse in Punjab. So, but in my field, I also found a very interesting observation that since it was an agricultural setup, they were using fodder cutting machine, and many women had lost their limbs in the, so technology technology had created this problem, but we need actually research whether more men with disabilities are there, whether women with disabilities are counted at all or
Mm.
not. So, there are many questions here, and we need researchers to tell us more on that. I'm surprised that there are so few questions. I'm sure all of you have classrooms with the, diverse student population, and many of you would be now probably thinking that if you have a deaf student or a blind student, what kind of accommodation the student would require. So can you share, can the participants share their experiences, if
Yeah, good evening, madam.
yes.
Actually, in here in our university, in my own class, actually there is one
Where are
student who
you
will.
from? Where are
Uh,
you
I
from?
I am from Central University of Himachal Pradesh,
Okay, yeah.
and in fact, I used to see other students actually, which
Mm,
belongs to other background, including library science or chemistry or mathematics or whatever. I mean,
mm,
so sometimes when these universities buildings are, I mean, used to be made. So people have not thought actually about these students actually. For example, if I will let you know my own experience, whether it was a means I have been there in Jamia as well in Delhi, and as well as in Bits Pilani, Rajasthan, and Shri Mata Vaishno Devi University, Katra, and many other places. So I have seen people have not thought about these students. So once this NAC grading is done, they used
yes.
to ask these questions actually.
Mm,
And after then, people have started to think about those things.
yeah, it is always from above, you know. And especially in our case, disability rights movements have been, they started only in 90s, who kind of spoke about accessibility issues. And within some universities also now, there are networks,
Yeah.
networks of students who are on social media together, and they are voicing their concerns. But you are absolutely right that there has to be some kind of a pressure from above to think about these questions. So, for instance, the policy says that you have to give accessible education, but how many of us know that uh, students with disabilities have to be given extra time, they have to be given extra assistance, and there are kind of notifications from Department of Disability Affairs and Government of India, and how many of us have read those notifications? So I think there is a large level, there is a widespread level of ignorance, and so I don't and leadership is also not there. So there are so few persons with disability who are faculty. So their absence also makes it difficult for ableist attitudes or ableist perceptions to easily go away.
Yeah, that's true. In fact, yeah. Even in a hostel in JNU, I have seen, especially I was in Jhelum. So I have seen there as well that people have thought about
Yeah.
these things initially. I mean,
Yeah.
so yeah, this thing was there. So it would be good, ma'am, especially starting from their toilets and other amenities which can be provided to them. And once we are in that particular situation, then we are able to feel those things actually.
Mm.
So in this way means if those things can be done, then it would be good for that particular section.
No, it is good for everyone.
Yeah.
So the idea of universal design that is being promoted, so everyone will gain from it. So we should not be thinking in terms of us and them, but in terms of what is good for people, who inhabit a social world together. So this kind of othering is not really helpful.
So at least, ma'am, this NAC criteria is there. So at least people, those who are going for NAC accreditation, at least they are doing. I mean, they'll have to do forcefully. So that is another one pressure from NAC team actually. So yeah, thank you.
Just to look at the statistics, with how many of you have had a disabled colleague while studying in college or at work? If you can say yes if you have somebody or you've taught somebody.
There is my one friend, sir, who has done his PhD from humanities from JNU itself.
Hmm.
So means I think initial start in just 1 year back he was awarded PhD degree.
Hmm.
So, but yes, his life used to depend upon others a lot actually.
Hmm. Hmm.
So yeah, this is-
Hmm.
The idea is to enable person with disability to lead more or less an independent life.
Hmm. Hmm.
The person should be able to, like I remember one of my colleague who was teaching in English department in JNU. She had almost 90% disability, and she was on full-time support, wheelchair user. And she often used to say that because of my class, I'm here. So, and she came without reservation. So her parents actually thought of, educating her and enabling her to have an independent life. And but how many of us actually think about that? And we tend to look at persons with disabilities as essentially as dependents, and a kind of charity attitude is there towards them.
Ma'am, I have one question. Like, who used to give this particular certificate? I mean, as far as
There
disability
is
is
a team
concerned.
of doctors. There is a team of doctors, and from the government hospital. But in my fieldwork, I found that the in order to get a certificate, uh, a person with disability has to run around at least for 6 months, 6 to 8 months, get at least 22 signatures from different departments and different places, and finally give present oneself before uh, a team of doctors, and the doctors actually gave a certificate. So I think it's a very, very tedious process, and that also is discriminatory in many ways.
Yeah, why I'm asking is that means one of my colleague who has, this, I think VH category. So I think in 2017 he has given UPSC's exam, and accordingly he was selected in that category. But Himachal government has said that no, 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 this is not like that, and after then he was not given.
Look,
So
now you have very stringent laws, so he can move to the court.
Yeah,
And
that case is
yeah,
going on,
yeah,
ma'am. This High Court. He has won that particular case, and court said that okay, you government will have to create that position.
yes,
So, and after then they went to the Supreme Court now. So the case is there in Supreme Court.
look at such a protracted struggle to
Mm.
realize one's own, basic rights.
Mhm.
And one more thing I just want to add here, ma'am, that as far as this, I mean, means hearing loss also, which I have beard myself. So it should be, I think, accounted to some extent.
No, it is
Some,
there. It is there.
yeah, but I think I don't know about its status, how much it is needed actually. I mean, so that some particular person can get the benefit of that one.
Somebody has written about dentistry being totally psychomotor skill based and dealing with humans does not allow for that. Again, I would say that there are experts. There are experts who look into the functional imperatives, requirements uh, mm, uh, of a particular discipline. But in many countries, persons with disabilities have entered the medical profession and they are doing pretty well. So, you can acquire disability at any stage. So it's not that, you are disabled and then you are discriminated against and you are not allowed to do a certain kind of job. But as I was talking about Murphy's case, you are, you could get disability at any stage. Then what do you do? You ask the person to sit back and relax and not work. So it's not that, you have to understand the complexity of the situation. As far as the courses are concerned, again, uh, uh, I think it is very, very important for institutions to have a policy of restructuring courses on a regular way, in a regular fashion. So, disability, like gender, is one of those, concerns. Some years back, 2 or 3 decades back, even gender was thought to be something which could never enter in a prominent way in disciplines. But today, you see gender being there everywhere, or the question of caste, for instance. So I don't see why disability discussions around disability actually cannot happen in universities. And why can't we we are talking about becoming Vishnu Gurus, and we can't, restructure our professions, especially medical profession. It should be in US. It is part of the nursing profession as well. How to deal with the persons with disabilities who are sick, who are hospitalized, and so you require. I remember, since my mother, has been very sick, and I see that none of the hospitals and clinics are equipped to actually make space for such people. So, if I were to take her to have a CAT scan or say X-ray, it is not really dignified. The way people, deal with such patients who are disabled by their, illness. So, yeah, Shalini, you have a hand raised.
Yes,
Can
ma'am.
you?
That dentistry point was raised by me. Ma'am, I've been a dentist for 26 years now and have been teaching for the same amount of time. And ma'am, it is not possible for us to customize our course for physically handicapped individuals. And ma'am, what you are talking about is the dignity of a handicapped person and how to treat
Don't
them and how to
use
deal
the
with them.
term handicap. I did not use handicapped at any point. Handicapped is a very outdated term, and it is very, insulting for disabled people. Yeah, so please get back to your question. I'm sorry for
Uh,
interruption.
So we treat the people with utmost dignity. I'm talking over here to customize the course for a person who does not have the necessary psychomotor skill. That we cannot customize the course for them. That is what I'm saying.
There's
We
nothing
in
impossible. There is nothing impossible. That is what I believe in. So, you need to be optimistic and you need to at least start the discourse, start the discussion. You are foreclosing any possibility of restructuring. That is my problem.
I think I can understand Shalini's sort of technical issues, but I think what probably Nilika is trying to say is to actually at least have a discussion of how much or what can be done and sensitize the community at large about inclusiveness of people who are disabled and take them along. And I
Sir,
think also
sensitization of the community at large is entirely another thing. What
Hmm.
I was commenting upon was
No,
the impossibility of training somebody like that with in our course. That is what I'm saying. It is a it is it is not that a discourse has not happened, but sir, imagine somebody was mentioning about loss of eyesight. So just imagine. Can you even imagine now? I mean, the
No, I'm not
scenario.
talking about
Or
that.
somebody who is,
You are
I'm not
talking
talking
about it.
about sensitization of the society at large. I'm talking about the course because this
No,
was
no,
being addressed to us as teachers. So I just mentioned it over there
no,
that it is
Shalini,
predominantly
Shalini, I would like
psychomotor.
to get back to you on the question of, again, what is possible and what is not possible. And I think that the discussion is not there. The 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 whole point is that there are different kinds of disability. Don't club all the disabilities as having the same kind of character. That is my problem. So I am sure the blind people will not have the same kind of, obviously they have that capacity, but they can do other kind of work. So my problem is that do we do we think of say blind doctors at all? We used to have people earlier with age who would acquire disability. So were they less in any ways? So my point is that you at least start discussing the different nature of impairments and also the possibilities that people can do certain kind of work, all of us have certain kind of abilities and also disabilities, all of us, but we kind of club uh, all persons with impairments as somewhat less, somewhat incompetent, or somewhat not, like the case which was discussed by Surendra. um, the High Court is saying that the state has to create a position, but state government is not interested.
thanks very much, Nilika. Thanks very much to all of you.
Thank you.